start of a new cycle, a new campaign is always exciting. It's refreshing in many ways. I think having a bit of time post-World Cup, having a January camp or window to go into has given us all, I think, that little bit of time to breathe, to reflect, to review, to look at, what's available over this next quadrennial in terms of our player pool. But then the reality hits that we're still in competition. We're still in a Nations League qualification game that's important not only for Gold Cup, not only for an opportunity to compete in the Nations League finals, but also for ranking points to ensure that Canada maintain a top 4 ranking for Copa America. So there's so much to play for in March. Sometimes starting a new cycle, you get a couple of friendly games or really have a look at those players that were on the extended squads and the wider squads that Canada have put out over the last few years. I think we have to pick up from where we left off. We created a good foundation, I think, in the last quadrennial to give us a lot to build on moving forward. So, selection was more about winning matches. It was more about who's fit and not injured and who's playing at the levels required to compete against tough opponents like Curacao and Honduras.
It's been over 3 months since Qatar. Given what's been going on around the men's and women's teams off the pitch, has it been business as usual for you? And when you get the team together, do you address the elephant in the room, so to speak, or do you just focus on football?
There's no doubt that what's happening behind the scenes has taken an emotional toll. I think everyone's mental health is important, and I think for those that are working in the organisation, and the players, it definitely is taking its toll. It should be a really celebratory time in our football history, but ultimately it's becoming a time of provocation and change, and that's important too. So, I think as a leader, I don't think you can just ignore these things. I think you have to ensure you fully understand what's happening in that environment and how people feel and, what they're really trying to say with their actions. But at the same time, we're here to inspire through our performances as much as what's happening off the pitch. And I think that's what I have to focus on now and try to bring this group of players and the organisation's attention to winning 2 very important matches, which, give us a chance to maybe go off and push for our first trophy in a long time.
I just want to ask you about getting the band back together here. I guess, how do you feel about? I know it's been a long time. It doesn't seem that long ago that we were all in Qatar together. But how do you feel about just getting the guys back together and getting the group back together and just getting all back together as a unit again?
I think it was an excitement building, over the last 3 months. What we learned over the last 4 years, understanding what we need to change for this next 4 years to get this country to the next level. We respect that it was a 4-year process to lay a foundation that hopefully we can all stand on now to reach another level in world football, another level of respect and another level of achievement. Well, those conversations over the last 3 months have been really deep and meaningful with the majority of the squad. So the process of reconnecting has been going on for some time now. I think bringing the players in, there's a real energy that I'm sensing and a desire and a commitment to want to win things for Canada. So we finished top of Concacaf on that journey. That was something we were all privileged to be part of, and we've got to ensure that there isn't any complacency going into CONCACAF because there's just no easy games. The conditions, the realities on how hungry these teams are to chase you now, which we're the hunted now, not the hunters in many ways. So there's a lot of added motivation, I think, for this group. But right at the core of it, they want to experience lifting a trophy for Canada. They want to experience winning and pushing up the rankings at the world levels. So they're the messages that I've heard, Eric, from the players and what they're excited about coming back in. And I think all of us, it's been too long now. And I think we've had enough time just to let the World Cup go and the excitement and the feelings from that just to get ready to go again.
When you look back at the way you guys played at the World Cup and you have these conversations with players, what specifically do you take away from the performances on the field, and how is that going to kind of inform the way that you guys play in this upcoming window?
Yeah, I mean, the time that we had post-World Cup really afforded us the opportunity to get into the deep dive, and you let the emotions settle of getting knocked out of the group stage at the second game. You know, that's tough. It's tough for any team to absorb in the moment, and with that, the noise that comes with those experiences. But when that, you know, the dust is settled, you're able to get into the learnings, the key learnings, and in working with the players, they've all seen the analytical deep dive into our performance and the review of that. And I think the starting point in speaking to the players is always where we started on the grid, you know, coming into this World Cup, and players recognising what we believed was achievable, and then comparing that with, you know, the cold hard facts of how many World Cups you've been to as a team, how many Tier 1 games you had in preparation, how many Tier 1 players you had in your squad in comparison, what the cumulative valuation was of our team in relation to our opponents, etc., etc., etc. So the players were able to, again, look at the starting points and then progressively work through our achievements, as well as look at our gaps. And the stats are very clear. You know, there were some very positive elements of Canada's performance. And I think what people could see, or the players could see, is the things that we put attention to. We were actually ranked pretty high in the world in those areas. You know, some of the physical data, Canada's players were finishing number 1 in the world positionally in some aspects of their average physical output. So there was something about our effort that was unquestionable across the team. And then when you look at some of the tactical data, Canada coming out as, you know, having the second highest defensive line height, it showed, again, a commitment to that aggressive style, or being in the top 5 for denying progressions into your attacking quarter. You know, top 5 in the world shows, again, you know, the resilience and some of the defensive acumen. You know, there were some big gaps, and the gaps where we underperformed in both boxes. You know, all of our opponents overperformed in their goal scoring abilities against Canada. So these are things that, one, we need to put more attention on. I think I came out the Uruguay game saying this, that, you know, a team has 3 shots on target and scores 2, you know, or against Belgium we have 24 shots on goal, and, you know, we're not able to convert. What we train is what we become, and a lot of our work in the foundation phase building into Qatar was around our progression and denying progression. Now we've got to get into the finer details of how to score against Tier 1 teams that have quality advantages over you, and teams with experiential advantages. How do we, you know, break those new barriers for this team? In short, we've done the work with the players to raise awareness, and now it's about getting into Concacaf, which is a different beast, Josh. You're now facing underdogs. You're not the underdog in those games. You're not facing qualitative disadvantages, you know, on paper. You know, our team, you know, we have players playing at higher levels. So now this is about, you know, back into that mentality and spirit to go into tough environments, hostile environments, and being able to perform and get results in tough places against teams that are very motivated to beat you. So things shift. Hopefully we can get Tier 1 games in the future, because I think the players and staff are clear. Canada can't go into its next tournament with only 1 Tier 1 game in a decade. You know, when you're in those matches, you're learning on the job as players, as a staff, as you start to realise, you know, the differences between your team and the teams you're playing against. We need those games, and hopefully some friendly matches in September, October open the door to that.
Hi, John. Thanks for your time, mate. You mentioned this being the start of the new quadrennial and what you're looking on, but obviously it's a bit shorter than previous quadrennials, and it's a bit unorthodox having automatically qualified for the World Cup, but the stakes are obviously still kind of sky high. But I just wonder, with the squad today, but more so as you put your mind to June 2026, maybe looking at the age profile of some of the leaders in the squad, Atiba, Milan, Stephen Vittoria, are there specific areas of your team that you're more concerned, or maybe more focused on strengthening in the next year or so, looking forward towards kind of June 2026?
there is some transition expected over the next year or two. I think there'll be transition this year. There's a group we're committed to because we're currently in competition with Nations League, and there's players that just have got that experience of being in these environments, but more importantly, winning in these environments. It wasn't so long ago Canada really struggled to go away and get results or wins in Concacaf environments, and these players have had that experience together. So there's an element of keeping a group together for a period of time to allow the continuity of the Nations League competition. But I think you'll see some transition this year. But at the same time, Joe, you have to have players that are playing at that next level and at a level that their experiences warrant the calls up. And I think that, when you look at Canada now, and we've got some young players in MLS that are knocking on the door, which is brilliant. And at some point, while MLS is a solid league and there's great experiences can be had in that environment, those Champions League experiences, the Europa League experiences, those are the next level of football experiences that I want my players to be pushing towards, and to be able to be at that place where Morocco is at, where you've got 14 tier 1 players there, 3 in your squad. So I think that's a reality. I mean, we were projecting out. We were talking about this with the players in our 2026 projections and looking at what our squad could look like. I think at the highest we may have 8 tier 1 players, and the average to get out of a group stage, well, it was at an all-time highest this year, which was 16, and those are players playing in the top 5 leagues. So you're projecting out on a bigger picture and looking at what the pool looks like as it is, and which players might track in your pool to the top 5 leagues in Europe. We're confident we will have some players tracking, but it takes 2 decades, 3 decades to get to where the US are now, or again where teams like Morocco or Japan have been able to get to with their numbers. So it will take time, but as I said to the players, it's about now saying if there is going to be another qualitative differential for Canada, where do we now have to focus our attention? And these are the questions, the players have been mulling over with the staff. How do we make sure we do close that gap and we're not coming into another tournament recognizing, okay, there are gaps here, but we're not using that as any excuse. This is a home World Cup. And also what we know is in home World Cups, there's only, I think, 6-7 teams in the last 7 World Cups have been able to break out of a group with, less than the averages of the tier 1 players. And, the majority of those teams that have broken out of the group have been home World Cup teams, hosts. So I think it bodes well because of your seeding and your rankings, but that's not for us. We want to be the best team we can be and give ourselves the best teams to push way beyond a group stage when we're in 2026. But the reality is it will take longer to produce and develop a squad that is littered with, the tier 1 players. That gives you more of the probability of breaking out of groups and into quarterfinals and into semifinals.
I guess as you saw at the World Cup, I mean, obviously, you had a chance to see midfields and how important, they are in your group. You got a chance to go up against the best. It's no secret for you guys lately. You've had a bit of a tough time just in terms of injuries and form. You got to call up Victor Laturi, obviously, to add to this group. So what do you make kind of your group now? And, how important is it just growing the depth there, especially as you get set to play those games in 2026 and 2024?
Yeah, I mean, players that aren't able to come in open opportunities for others, and looking forward to see Victor in our environment and Dominic Sator. And these are players that have progressed out of our Canadian Premier League and taken a risk to go over to Europe in those sort of second and third tier leagues in Europe and getting experiences that Canadians have often struggled to. I think those that have taken that jump have not always found it easy, and these players are getting consistent minutes, which is really important for selection in these windows. They're playing in leagues where it's not easy. It reminds us of some of the matches that they're going to have to play in CONCACAF, where their backs are against the wall and tough conditions. But they've done well, and to see Victor playing against Rangers and Celtic and 50,000 stadiums being able to perform and handle that pressure and demonstrate his capabilities. I think that was big for me. You know, some of the other games are more about tough matches in Scotland, which if anyone follows that league, there are a lot of tough games there, you know, very physical. But, you know, those games against Celtic and Rangers, I think, you know, he was able to really showcase not only his mental capacity to handle the moment, but some of his technical ability. So looking forward to see him in there. And again, you always get a gauge, you know, can they handle that next step up when you're on a training field with, you know, Davies, David, Lauren, you know, Buchanan, Estacio, and you're in and around Osorio, the movements of those players and the speed that they'll want to play at. You know, players get found out pretty quickly on one, whether or not they've got the technical capability, but more importantly, the mindset to try and adapt in that moment and stick with it. So I'll be able to see that. And either way, I think it'll be a great learning experience for both these players.
Building on Alex's question, obviously Zator and Latourie, you know, very recently played in the Canadian Premier League. You know, what does it say about this league's continued growth that, you know, those players are able to go over and test themselves in Europe and obviously now find themselves in your national team player setup?
Yeah, I think it's really important that the Canadian Premier League is certainly creating a foundation for players to push on. I mean, Dom, he had a few tough runs in different environments, but for me, it's a testament of, you know, that player that just has the resilience to one, believe in his abilities, and two, to keep going and keep pushing. And I think, you know, when you're starting in the Canadian Premier League, for a lot of players, they know that, you know, this is a starting point to hopefully the next level of football, which is Europe. We're starting to see it. You know, I think Victor's another great example of a young player, and I think that's what I'm hoping to see. I'm hoping to see that Canadian Premier League just get a bit younger, so we can start springboard, you know, those younger players that can really use that development experience. You know, playing in a good league in Canada with experienced Canadian players, and then springboard out to the next level. I mean, the younger those players are, the better. So, you know, it'll be good to see, you know, more players under the age of 21, you know, picking up minutes in the Canadian Premier League, and therefore hopefully springboarding more out like Victor.